Good afternoon. Welcome to Authors at Google. My name is Larry Brilliant, and I work with Google.org. I suppose we should really not call this Authors at Google. We should probably call it Icons at Google as we begin to think about all the wonderful people we've had here. I don't think we've had anybody as warm and wonderful as the person that you're going to meet today, Ben Cohen. Sheryl Sandberg was to do this introduction, but she asked me to do it. I think it's because she wanted aging white men of a certain age to stand together. But I have to tell you, in this case it's true because Ben and I have been friends for more than 2 decades, and we've been part of some of the most wonderful organizations, the Social Venture Network, Camp Win a Rainbow, and he's helped us also with the Seva Foundation. In fact, he's made ice cream for 2 of my best friends, Jerry Garcia and Wavy Gravy. And he's going to talk a little bit about that because one of the 2 things he's going to touch on is how to use the product of your company and the meaning of your company to be socially responsible. And when he made an ice cream for Wavy Gravy, the profits from that ice cream went to Wavy Gravy's Camp Win a Rainbow to create a scholarship fund. And I think that gives you an insight into the way he ran Ben & Jerry's ice cream. But he's also here today because he's going to be talking about what he's touring the country on, which are 2 organizations, TrueMajority and Business Leaders for Sensible Responsibilities. Ben is an advocate for government and corporate responsibility. And we brought him here for the Global Philanthropy Forum, which we had 2 months ago. I don't know how many of you got a chance to see him then. Were there? Oh, that's good. Well, he stunned us with his presentation on Oreo cookies. You know, I think that being in the ice cream business, he just automatically retreats to desserts. And I can see some Oreo cookies paraphernalia back there. So I suspect you're in for a real treat. Because he's going to be talking about how we change U.S. budget priorities to reflect what is really genuinely something we all feel should be a national commitment to education, healthcare, energy independence, job training, and deficit reduction. In fact, what he's going to talk about are values that are shared by 2/3 of Americans, but we don't know we share those values because we don't have a place and a way to talk about it. He's going to talk about that today. Please join me in welcoming an icon at Google, Ben Cohen.
Oh, beautiful, dude. Thank you. Well, thanks very much. It is an honor to be here at the center of the digital universe. It's a new world coming, and it's good to see that you're the guys that are going to make it happen. A lot of times people like to know how it is exactly I got to be where I am today. I can tell you that it all started in 7th grade gym class. Jerry and I were the 2 slowest, fattest kids in the class. And, you get to be good friends with whoever you can find at the back of the pack running around the track. And, we made it through junior high and high school together, and then it came time to go to college. I didn't want to go to college, and my father and sister applied for me, and I ended up going to Colgate and dropped out. And then I went to Skidmore, dropped out, went to NYU, dropped out, and finally got into the most unstructured college program at the time, which was the University Without Walls, where the whole world is your campus. There are no teachers, there is no classrooms. The idea is to go out into the world, learn whatever you want to learn, come back, prove that you learned it, and they give you a degree, and I dropped out of there too. And then, I tried to make a living as a potter, making bowls out of clay, and nobody would buy my pottery. Jerry, on the other hand, went through 4 years straight of college, applied to 30 medical schools. They all rejected him. And so there we were, 2 failures. And we said, well, if we're going to get anywhere, I guess we're going to have to start our own business. And, the only thing we really liked doing was eating. So it had to be a food business. And we ended up picking homemade ice cream. We didn't know how to make ice cream. So we found this correspondence course called Ice Cream. It's still available from Penn State University. It was $5 for the course. We didn't have much money. We split one between the 2 of us. And, it took the tests. They were all open book tests. You send them into your teacher. They mark it and send them back. We got hundreds on every test. And we thought this was a good sign. And so we opened a homemade ice cream parlor in Burlington, Vermont, in a dilapidated old gas station on an investment of $8,000, $4,000 apiece. And we renovated the place ourselves, bought all this used restaurant equipment, got a loan from the bank for another $12,000, and started as a homemade ice cream parlor. And that's all we ever planned on doing and being. And then, the winter rolled around, and, it gets pretty cold in Burlington, Vermont, and nobody would buy our ice cream. And we decided we would try wholesaling it, and I became the delivery driver, and we would sell our ice cream in tubs, 2.5 gallons, to the restaurants, and then after a while, we sold them in pints to grocery stores, and that started really taking off, and that began, the Ben & Jerry's that we know today. Started in Vermont, went into New Hampshire, not very highly populated states, and then eventually went into the biggest market that we had ever been in at the time, which was Boston. And in order to make sure our ice cream sold off the supermarket shelves in Boston, we decided to do our first ever TV advertising. And we could only afford late night TV and 10-second ads. And, the ad was me and Jerry live inside of a pint container. And here's how it went. Hi, I'm Ben. I'm Jerry. We may not have the money for a 30-second TV ad, but we sure do make some of the best ice cream you ever tasted. And that was it. And it worked. The ice cream sold, and things were going well. The business was growing, got to be to a level of about $3 million, and we turned around and looked at ourselves one day, and we said, what's going on here? I mean, we're not being ice cream men anymore. We're not spending our time making ice cream and scooping ice cream to our friends and neighbors over the counter. We've become administrators and bosses, and we are hiring and firing and dealing with accountants and lawyers and writing memos, and that wasn't exactly what we had in mind. And and also we felt like the business was becoming just like another cog in the economic machine that tends to oppress a lot of people. And our first inclination was to sell the business, and then we decided to keep it and see if it was possible that business is really just a tool, a neutral tool like a hammer that can either be used to destroy things or to build things. And we decided to see if it was possible to use our business as a force for progressive social change in order to heal some of the problems in the society that business in general really had been creating. And at that stage in our life, in the business's life, we were growing very rapidly, and it was the stage when normally businesses take in venture capital. And instead of going that route, we decided to see if we could use that need for cash as an opportunity to make the community the owners of the business, so that as the business prospered, the community would automatically prosper. And we were able to have what became the first ever in-state public stock offering. So we sold stock in Ben & Jerry's just to Vermonters, and we deliberately had a very low minimum buy of $126. so that people from virtually all economic strata could get in on this ground floor opportunity, this IPO actually, which is usually reserved for fairly sophisticated investors that have, a fair amount of money. And after that offering, we ended up selling it out, and 1 out of every 100 Vermont families became a shareholder in Ben & Jerry's. Well, a few years later, we had a national public stock offering, and our feeling at the time was that essentially business is a machine for making money, and that if we want to be of as much service to the community as possible, what we need to do is give away as much of our profits as possible. And so we started the Ben & Jerry's Foundation that got 7.5% of our pre-tax profits. And it wasn't before long that the foundation was totally overrun with requests dealing with really important issues like hunger, domestic abuse, people who didn't have any homes, people who couldn't get health care. And we could only fund about 5% of the requests that were coming in. And we realized that, pretty much every foundation in the country was really in the same position. And we said, just giving away money ain't going to do the trick. Isn't there something else that we could do as a business that would help to address these issues? And we started by looking at the definition of business. The usual definition of business is that business is an entity that provides a product or a service. What we did at Ben & Jerry's is that we came up with a different definition of business. And we said that business is a combination of organized human energy plus money, which equals power. And I would go so far as to say that that becomes the most powerful force in the world. And business is pretty much recognized as the most powerful force in the world today. But it's something that only really happened in my own lifetime. Originally, the most powerful force in the world was religion. And then the most powerful force in the world came to be government, nation states. And today it's business. And you can see that reality echoed in the major buildings in cities around the world. If you go to Europe and you go to a city and you look at the buildings there, you see that the oldest big ornate building is a religious institution. The second oldest big ornate building is a governmental institution. And today, the big ornate buildings that are being built are commercial. Well, as that most powerful force, business controls our society. It controls our media through ownership. It controls our legislation through lobbying. It controls our elections through campaign contributions. And it controls our everyday lives as individuals, as customers and employees. And all of that is done in the narrow self-interest of business without a concern for the effect that it has on the society as a whole. And that's the big difference between today's most powerful force, business, and those other former most powerful forces. Because at least religion and government had as their purpose to improve the common welfare of the country. What we began to realize at Ben & Jerry's is that there's a spiritual aspect to business, just as there is to the lives of individuals. As you give, you receive. As you help others, you're helped in return. As your business helps the community supports your business. Well, this is a universal spiritual law. And, the fact of the matter is that most people involved in running businesses are good people, and they care about social concerns. They care about people living in poverty. And yet, most businesses aren't doing anything about it. So how is it that most businesses are not integrating these social concerns? And I think the reality and the reason is essentially twofold. First is the compartmentalization of our lives. We live in a society where you deal with your spiritual concerns on Saturday or Sunday in church or temple or mosque. You deal with your social concerns by volunteering or donating some money to some social service organization. And you deal with your financial needs in the world of business. But the reality is that we will never accomplish our spiritual desires or our social desires until we integrate those two components into business, where we spend the majority of time and where our labor is organized and we have the money to be at our most powerful. And I think the other reason why business has not been addressing these issues is because of the bottom line. The only way most businesses measure success is by profit, how much money is left over at the end of the year. And at Ben & Jerry's, what we said was that, well, if the problem is how we measure our success, why don't we just change how we measure our success? And that's what we did. At Ben & Jerry's, we redefined the bottom line. And so the bottom line became two parts. How much have we helped to improve the quality of life in the community, and how much profit is left over? And if we failed at either one, we failed. And by doing that and having a social audit at the end of each year next to our financial audit, we were able to organize the company and focus on those social needs at the same time that we made a profit. And so I want to emphasize that, philanthropy is great, but the most powerful force, the most powerful opportunity is not giving money away. The most powerful opportunity is integrating social concerns into day-to-day business activities, because the ways to do that are limitless. At Ben & Jerry's, it became part of our flavor decisions, it became part of our sourcing decisions, it became part of our finance decisions, it became part of our retailing decisions. And we actually wrote a book about it. What? Is that the book that's here? Ben & Jerry's Double Dip, How to Lead with Your Values and Make Money Too? I'll bet it is. Well, or I don't know, maybe it's the next one. But if you want to find out more about it, that's the place to read about it. At the end of the book, it concludes with the idea that perhaps the most powerful tool that business has at its command is its voice. That when business talks, politicians listen, the media listens, the public listens. The problems facing our country can seem overwhelming. We live in the richest country in the world, and yet we have the highest child poverty rate in the industrialized world. Our schools are strapped for money. People can't get the health care they need. We have a dependence on oil that's getting us into wars and causing a whole lot of pollution. There's millions of kids around the world each year that are dying of hunger. It seems like I was brought up to believe that these problems are insurmountable, that they've always been here, they always will be here, that there's not enough money in the world to take care of these problems. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's not. It's not insurmountable, and we can take care of those problems. And business can do its part, and it can help. But it's going to take hundreds of billions of dollars to solve those problems, and there's really only one place you can get that, and that's the federal budget. I'm the president of the Priorities Campaign, which is a project of Business Leaders for Sensible Priorities, a group of 700 business people around the country, and TrueMajority, a grassroots political action online organization of about 600,000 people. The Priorities Campaign asks, how is it possible that in the richest country in the world, we have so many of these unmet human needs? Well, as business people, we started by following the money. And we decided to look at the federal discretionary budget. Now, this is the amount of money that Congress has available each year to allocate as it sees fit. There's another part of the budget called the mandatory budget, and that's interest on the national debt, Social Security, and other mandatory expenses. But this is the amount of money, and it's about $900 billion a year that Congress has available to allocate. And when you hear them talking about the budget in the news and on TV, this is the budget they're talking about. As you can see, the Pentagon has about 50% of it, and things like education, the environment, healthcare, world hunger get all these little slices. Now, what we said at Business Leaders for Sensible Priorities is, the Pentagon only grew to be 50% of the discretionary budget during the Cold War, when we were in this neck-and-neck race with another superpower. But today, the United States is the world's only superpower, and we spend as much money as the entire rest of the world combined on the Pentagon. And so isn't it possible that we don't have to still spend quite as much as we were spending before? We said, but what do we know? We're just a bunch of business people. Let's ask military people. And so we formed a board of military advisors that includes Admiral Stansfield Turner, former the head of the CIA, Admiral Jack Shanahan, Larry Korb, former Assistant Secretary of Defense under Reagan. And they said, well, yeah, you're correct. We are today spending $60 billion a year, and that's what this little wedge represents, on weapons that were designed during the Cold War to defeat the former Soviet Union that have no use protecting us from terrorism or with today's military threats. And so, the question is, if there's $60 billion of waste there in the Pentagon, what can you do with it? And that comes to the heart of the priorities campaign. Now, as Larry said, I'm pretty much a dessert guy, and when I am faced with a difficult problem, I tend to think about dessert. In this case, Oreo cookies. And so what I have here is essentially a bar chart where each Oreo cookie equals $10 billion. And so what I've got here is, with the addition of this little stack on top, I think I can vaguely do this. Ha! The amount that we spend on the so-called peacetime Pentagon budget, 50 Oreos, $500 billion a year. And that doesn't include another 12 Oreos that we spend, another $120 billion a year on the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, in comparison to that, what I'd like to do is show you how much we spend on some of these other areas. On education K-12 at the federal level, we spend 4 Oreos, $40 billion. On world hunger, we spend 1 Oreo, $10 billion. On children's health care, we spend 5 Oreos, $50 billion. On energy independence, we spend, that's a quarter of an Oreo. On job training, we spend 3/4 of an Oreo, and on deficit reduction, we spend 0. Now, all we're saying at the priorities campaign is, let's take 1 Oreo off the top here, put it on education, and at $10 billion a year over a period of 12 years, that would be enough money to repair and rebuild every school in the United States that needs it. Take another Oreo off the top, put it on world hunger, take 1 more, split it in half. You've all done this before. Put half of it on world hunger. That's an Oreo and a half, $15 billion a year. Believe it or not, for $15 billion a year, we could provide food self-sufficiency for all of the 6 million kids a year around the world that are dying of starvation. Take another Oreo off the top, put it on children's health care, and that's enough money to provide health care for every kid in the United States that currently doesn't have access. Take another cookie, put it on energy independence, and that would be enough over a period of 10 years to reduce our need for imported oil by 50% through energy conservation and financial incentives to drive hybrid cars. And take one more off, put it on deficit reduction, and that's at least $10 billion a year to start to pay down the debt, and take that last half a cookie, put it on job training, and that's enough to provide job training for another 250,000 laid-off workers per year. Now, some people see this demonstration and they say, well, what does that prove? Ben can move around a bunch of Oreos, but isn't that going to leave us vulnerable to our potential adversaries? Well, here's the way it looks. The country that spends the most that we consider to be a potential adversary, even though they're our major trading partner, is China. And they spend $10 billion, $100 billion, 10 Oreos a year. The country that spends the next most is pretty much an ally these days, and that's Russia. They spend 6 Oreos, $60 billion a year. And the countries we're really concerned about, that would be Iran, Libya, Syria, North Korea, all together, between them, all combined, they spend 1 Oreo. So as you can see, even after we took off enough Oreos to take care of all those social needs, there's still more than enough to go around to take care of these guys. Well, still, some people feel like, but we've been hearing that our troops don't have enough armor, and they don't have enough armored vehicles, and isn't this going to hurt our troops? Well, I want to give you just one example of the Cold War era mentality that we are still following through on today, and give you just one example of the Cold War era weapon systems we're talking about canceling. What I've got here is a container, and what I've got here is a bunch of BBs. And what I want to do is I want to use this to illustrate the size of our nuclear arsenal. So I'm going to put 1 BB in here. That represents the equivalent of 15 nuclear bombs the size of what blew up Hiroshima. And now I'm going to put in 6 BBs. That would be enough to blow up all of Russia. And now I'm going to put in the amount of BBs that represents the total US nuclear arsenal. That was 10,000 BBs, the equivalent of 150,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs. Now, some people hear that demonstration and they're a little depressed. However, we at the Priorities Campaign see this as an opportunity because we are currently spending $20 billion a year on that nuclear arsenal. And our board of military advisors tells us that we could cut the amount of money we're spending in half and save $10 billion a year and still have enough of a deterrent nuclear force to protect the vital interests of the United States. So what are we doing about this? That would be a good question to ask. We're very active right now in Iowa and New Hampshire, and I've got a little illustration of exactly what we're doing that I can get by doing this. Oh, that's the end of the show. What is this? This is the pre-show slide for Bloomberg. Ben Cohen. How do you do that? Oh, wait a minute.
So this is your laptop. Do we have your slides on here?
Do we have my slides on here? Yes. Oh, what do I do?
Well, do you have my laptop? Or do you
There. Oh, this is your laptop?
Right.
Jeez, I don't know. I gave my laptop to Josh. What's that? You want me to wing it? What?
Yeah, keep winging it. Keep winging it.
Well, you know, we're very active in Iowa and New Hampshire to make this an issue in the presidential primaries and caucuses that are operating right now. So we use kind of unusual methods of getting this information across to the people of Iowa and New Hampshire. We've been bird dogging the candidates, and you'll start to see in late August and in September, the national media will be starting to report on this, and the candidates are starting to shift their positions in favor of reducing Cold War era weapons. You know, it was, we need your help. We'd like you to become members of Business Leaders for Sensible Priorities. You can join as an individual. We need your ideas, your technical expertise in terms of helping our online efforts. And we need you to help us spread this campaign to the other early primary states and across the country. It's a big, hairy, audacious goal. But it's certainly something that we've got to do because there's no other way to address the problems of our country. You know, it was Martin Luther King who said that a country that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Our country, the last remaining superpower on earth, needs to learn to measure its strength, not in terms of how many people we can kill, but in terms of how many people we can feed, clothe, house, and care for. Well, I know that I've given you a whole lot of information today, and you might think, well, geez, I can't remember all that stuff. That's okay, because I'm also providing for you this incredible pen that within its barrel contains everything that I've just said, and you can use it to refer to. And those of you that were watching the Colbert Show a few months ago might have seen this little disc that I presented. I've got it right here, and you know, I thought that some of you might enjoy it as well. So, you know, there's some of these on the front table, and there's ice cream outside, and there's pens outside, and what have you. Good talking with you. Thanks so much for coming. Oh, there's questions. There's questions. Don't forget there's questions. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I really want to thank you for being here today.
Use the mic.
Thank you.
Please use the microphone. Not for the camera.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for being here and for this fantastic presentation. Frankly, I thought you'd be larger.
Thank you very much.
I have some concerns about the fungibility of Oreos. What do you say to people who say no matter how much you take off that stack and put into world hunger, there's no evidence that it's actually making an impact on world hunger because people eat the cookies along the way? And that kind of concern with this very linear presentation, people might say, yeah, they're not spending many Oreos on defense, but even with all that we're spending, we're really getting our asses kicked, and so we need to still spend more. How do you talk about the actual uses of the money and whether it will really have the effect that you say it will?
Well, for world hunger, you know, the information that we rely on comes from the UN Millennial Goals and Jeff Sachs at Columbia University. And in terms of the Pentagon budget, we rely on a report by Larry Korb, the former Assistant Secretary, that you can find online, and it details exactly which weapon systems aren't needed. And, you know, I mean, just in terms of common sense, I mean, you know, the threat today is terrorism. There's no other superpower that comes close. Replacing, say, our current generation of jet fighters that is today the most powerful in the world and totally unmatched with another higher tech version that costs 5 times as much doesn't really make sense. I mean, you know, to protect ourselves from who? Yeah.
Afraid I have to be a little bit more pragmatic about this. I tend to agree with you that we are spending way too much relative to the situation currently in defense. But on the other hand, we've got a lot of defense contractors. We've got a lot of contractors in various districts. So if you say, well, we're cutting out this program, you promptly get contributions from the contractors to the relevant congressmen and senators. You get protests from the people in the district who are going to be shut out and lose jobs. How do you actually plan to overcome these difficulties in moving the budget around?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, that's the reason why we have the situation that we have today. But once the people of the United States are aware of how the federal budget is sliced up, 2/3 of them want it shifted. You know, there was just a poll out by, you know, someone totally unrelated to us, a national poll that showed that 82% of the American public wants to get rid of this Pentagon waste. So, you know, what we're doing is we're fighting the issue with information, that we're giving people information about how the federal budget is sliced up and allowing people to make choices between what they want their money to go to. And once they have the information, they make the choices that we're talking about. And yes, we have to overcome the resistance of defense contractors, no doubt about it.
I think there's also a problem of, I seem to recall a number of surveys where people say, pulling numbers out of my hat here, 70% of people don't like what Congress is doing, but 80% love their congressperson. So when you get down to the local of, I want you to cut defense spending as an abstract, you get the support. But if it's, I want to get rid of this particular military contracting company in my district that's paying taxes, I think you'll end up with more personal opposition.
You know, it's not a matter of getting rid of defense contracting companies. It's a matter of not making weapon systems that are no longer needed. And in terms of the jobs issue and the taxes issue, we're just shifting money. So instead of money going into defense contractors, it's going into school construction, and that creates jobs. And instead of money going into, again, defense contractors, and it instead goes into providing more health care for people. So it does not, the economic effect is a wash, that it creates as many jobs as it cuts. Oh yes, a question from somewhere else. Ben & Jerry's parent company Unilever has been criticized on many fronts, including for making use of child labor and polluting. What do you think about Ben & Jerry's being owned by a company who seems to maintain a low level of corporate responsibility? Well, you know, in terms of the sale of Ben & Jerry's, I tried to prevent it. I didn't want the company sold. I wanted it to stay independent. You know, now that it is part of Unilever, you know, Unilever is not a company that has the same values as Ben & Jerry's. But, you know, that's who owns it now, and there's nothing I can do about it. But in terms of Ben & Jerry's itself, that company is continuing to source its brownies from a nonprofit bakery in inner city New York that's providing jobs and job training for formerly unemployable people, and, you know, just took a stand and against nuclear weapons and shifting that $10 billion to education. So, it's still doing some good stuff, but there's no doubt that the profits end up at Unilever. Another one. Fish food is my favorite Ben & Jerry's ice cream, but if there was a Google-branded Ben & Jerry's, that would be my favorite. Can you help us lobby for a, let's say, GUI Google Ben & Jerry's pint? It's a good name. And, a lot of our best-selling flavors were suggestions from customers. Chunky Monkey was that way. Cherry Garcia was that way. Chubby Hubby was that way. And, GUI Google, I can see it. And, most of those flavors that we now come up with, like we came out with a flavor for Steve Colbert, there's the royalty that he would get ends up going to a particular nonprofit organization. And, I don't know what Google would want, but, talk about it. It's within the realm of possibility. We have never partnered in a flavor name with a company before, but, there's never been a company like Google before, and who the heck knows?
Hi, I can't believe I'm actually doing this. So basically, it seems my own view is what you've done in terms of coming up with this idea of a socially conscious company is very remarkable. Actually, I just read a book recently by this guy who I guess founded this company in Bangladesh called the Grameen Bank, which made lots of microfinancing loans. And it seems like he had his own path through life, and he sort of ended up at a similar destination. I mean, to me, this is just truly remarkable, and I can't help but view that perhaps in the future, just changing our collective notion of what actually a business means, away from just this vehicle for making as much money as possible, might, as you hinted earlier, have ramifications across society. I guess my question is, in order to get there and change, our collective view of what a business is, do you think we can do this? I mean, what steps do you see possibly is leading down the road to that?
I think it's definitely possible to do it. I think Ben & Jerry's is a great example of it. Stonyfield Farm yogurt is another great example. Patagonia is another great example. Interface Carpets, another major corporation. I think the key to making the change happen is, number one, putting that social mission, that social purpose, into the mission statement of the company. That it needs to be at the very top of where things flow from. And once you have that as a mission, co-equal with making profits and making a high-quality product, then when you make decisions about what direction should the company go in, what opportunities should it decide to take advantage of and which ones should it pass up, you integrate the issue of the effect on the society with that corporate direction. So that's at the very top. And then at the very bottom, at the bottom line, you need to measure the effect that you're having on the quality of life in the society. And if you do both those things, all the stuff in the middle happens. The notion of measuring is so important. And sometimes people say, well, you can't quantify social stuff as easily as you can quantify dollars and cents. And that's true. So maybe you can't quantify it to the last penny. Maybe you can quantify it to the last quarter or 50 cents. But you can still measure the effect that you're having on the society. And you can do it. We wrote a book about it, and it's just a matter of will. And at Ben & Jerry's, people were always saying that, this social mission is going to be the undoing of your company, that, you can't possibly address social issues and make money at the same time. And it became clear to us that it was really the social mission that was driving the success of Ben & Jerry's and driving the profitability.
Thank you very much.
I see I'm being upstaged.
Thanks to Ben for being here. This was a very important message and a great event. Thanks to all of you for coming. Ben has agreed to stay around and sign books, and we have Peace Pop served by our founders.
Hey, all righty.